Across the medieval world, marriage was never simply about two people deciding to be together. A wedding meant two families, two networks, and sometimes even two entire communities joining in purpose. In a cathedral in Paris, a courtyard in Delhi, a household in Kyoto, or a courtyard in Cairo, the ritual was not centered on personal love. It was about duty, survival, and ensuring a future. Some couples eventually found love within those expectations, but the marriage itself existed long before affection ever entered the picture. Marriage shaped medieval society more than any law or ruler could. It determined who inherited land, who held power, and even what alliances were formed. In Christian Europe, the Church transformed marriage into a sacred ceremony that represented a bond witnessed by God. This was more than social convenience. It was treated as a spiritual promise connected to eternity. In the Islamic world, marriage was understood as a contractual balance of rights and responsibilities. It carried spiritual weight too, but the focus remained practical: protection, agreement, and mutual obligation. In India, marriage was a crucial ritual of life. Fire, prayers, and sacred verses turned the union into a religious duty. In China and Japan, where family lineage and ancestors shaped identity, marriage was a continuation of heritage rather than personal fulfillment. The couple acted as a bridge between generations, preserving the family line. Though ceremonies differed, the purpose was nearly identical across the world: stability, continuity, and survival. Love could exist, but it was not required. The path toward marriage did not usually begin with feelings, but with arrangements. In Europe, the idea of consent slowly gained ground under church influence, but families still made the decisions. They looked at land, dowries, alliances, and reputation. What mattered was how the marriage strengthened their position in society. In Islamic societies, the marriage contract involved negotiations led by guardians. Terms were agreed upon, and the bride received a gift that legally belonged to her alone, giving her a rare form of security. China and Japan relied on matchmakers. Wealthy households treated marriage as a strategy to expand influence, connect clans, and build networks of obligation. India blended astrology, caste expectations, and sacred customs. Charts were read to determine if a couple was cosmically compatible. The stars had more say than emotions. Everywhere, marriage was too serious, too valuable to risk on chance affection. Yet even within these rigid systems, people found ways to push back. Some couples eloped, others defied expectations. Widows sometimes remarried against family wishes. Quiet acts of rebellion started small shifts over centuries. Wedding ceremonies reflected the values of each culture. In Europe, vows were often spoken at the church entrance, where neighbors and priests could witness the union. The couple exchanged rings, received a blessing, and then walked to a feast where music and celebration turned the contract into a memory everyone shared. In Islamic weddings, witnesses listened as the marriage contract was spoken aloud. What mattered was the spoken promise. Afterward, a feast brought the entire community together. The ritual was dignified and clear. The marriage existed because people heard the agreement. In India, weddings took place around a sacred fire. The couple walked around the flames, taking 7 symbolic steps, each step promising support, loyalty, and spiritual partnership. In China, the bride traveled to her new home in a red carriage, veiled in red fabric, the color of joy and prosperity. She bowed to the family ancestors, symbolizing her acceptance into the lineage. In Japan, sake cups were shared between the families, not just the couple. Drinking from 3 cups in turns represented unity and harmony. Despite the cultural distance between them, every society treated marriage as something that needed to be witnessed, remembered, and validated by the community. Money and property shaped marriage as much as emotion or ritual. In Europe, a dowry from the bride's family accompanied the marriage. The husband also promised material security for the wife if she outlived him. Marriage balanced affection and inheritance. Land and wealth changed hands as much as hearts did. In Islamic societies, the bride received a payment directly from the groom. It belonged solely to her, not her parents. This gave women financial independence in ways that Europe did not. In India and China, dowries became symbols of status. Jewelry, textiles, livestock, and even land were transferred. A large dowry elevated a family. A small one damaged their honor. In Japan, marriage between noble families included exchanges of property meant to secure political loyalty. Economic survival disguised itself as marriage. People talked about love and virtue, but the real questions lived in balance sheets. Could the union secure a future, protect assets, and preserve the family? Age did not depend on maturity, but on usefulness. In Europe, church law permitted marriages at shockingly young ages, especially among nobility. The belief was that once a union was arranged, life would shape the couple, not the other way around. In Islamic societies, the contract could be formed early, but consummation was delayed until emotionally and physically appropriate. In China and Japan, age depended on the family's needs, not the couple's desires. A marriage meant continuing the bloodline. In India, customs varied widely, with some marriages arranged early to protect caste purity. Everywhere, society defined adulthood through responsibility rather than emotional growth. Today, laws about consent and legal age push back against those earlier expectations. Modern rights exist because history showed what happened when people lacked them. Love was complicated. In Europe, love outside of duty was considered dangerous. Poetry and songs about forbidden lovers were everywhere, but real relationships remained tightly controlled. In Islamic societies, love poetry flourished, sometimes using longing as a metaphor for divine yearning, but social orders still protected marriage above desire. In China and Japan, emotions were expected to remain quiet. Public harmony mattered more than private passion. India embraced poetry, celebrating both spiritual and human love. Though each society tried to control affection, art continued to whisper what law refused to allow. The rules could dictate marriage, but they couldn't silence longing. Ending a marriage was never easy. In Europe, the church treated marriage as indissoluble. Separation could happen, but real freedom usually required annulment, a privilege mostly for the powerful. In Islamic societies, marriages could end by mutual release or by the husband's declaration, with provisions allowing women to seek separation as well. China held detailed laws listing reasons for dissolving a union, but placed moral boundaries on a husband's power. Japan allowed written separation agreements acknowledged by families. India's approaches varied by custom and caste. No matter the culture, divorce was not simply a personal issue. It shifted property, honor, and alliances. Property and power defined married life. In Europe, a wife's legal identity merged with her husband's. She could not freely own or sell property unless widowed. In Islamic law, women retained property ownership and inheritance rights, a remarkable contrast. In China and Japan, property followed male lineage, though widows often managed estates. In India, the concept of a woman's personal wealth existed, but its protection depended on family ethics. Marriage transferred power while calling it virtue. Modern property laws, shared accounts, and financial independence are echoes of these old arrangements. A wedding was the moment when private promises became public truth. European feasts filled halls with music and bread. Islamic celebrations offered food to entire communities. Indian weddings exploded with color, drums, and fragrance. China wrapped the event in red, offering respect to ancestors first. Japan favored restraint, using small, deliberate gestures to express unity. Every wedding asked society to witness, and witnessing made the bond real. Marriage in the medieval world was never private. It happened in front of family, neighbors, and often an entire village or community. In Europe, the ringing of church bells signaled the celebration, calling everyone to witness the moment two families became connected. After the vows, the feast mattered as much as the ceremony. Roasted meats, bread, and barrels of ale filled long tables. Songs and dancing turned obligation into memory. The poor waited outside churches and feast halls, because leftovers from a wedding symbolized generosity and goodwill. Marriage wasn't just about a couple. It was about displaying unity and prosperity, reminding everyone that this new household had the strength to contribute to the community. In Islamic societies, the communal meal carried deep meaning as well. Families invited neighbors, friends, and even strangers to share food after the marriage contract was completed. This act of feeding others wasn't simply celebration. It reflected the belief that generosity brought blessings. A feast was a demonstration of hospitality and honor, proof that the new union joined not just two people, but entire networks of loyalty and support. In India, weddings turned into days of ritual and celebration. Drums echoed, incense burned, and bright colors filled every corner. Gold jewelry, henna patterns, and silk garments turned the ceremony into a living tapestry of tradition. Music and prayer blended into one experience, and even the smallest details had meaning, from flowers placed on the hair to the tying of sacred knots. The feast that followed was just as symbolic. Food meant abundance, and abundance meant the marriage began under good fortune. In China, weddings revolved around harmony and ancestral approval. The bride, hidden under a red veil, was carried to the groom's home in a decorated sedan chair. Firecrackers, lanterns, and drums announced her arrival. The first act inside the groom's house was not affection between the couple, but respect toward the ancestors. The newlyweds bowed to those who came before, confirming that the marriage was an extension of lineage. Only after honoring the past were they allowed to honor each other. Japan took a different approach: quiet, precise, and ceremonial. The couple shared sake from 3 cups, a ritual known as sansankudo. The gesture was small, but it carried a powerful meaning. Harmony between two families mattered more than individual desire. Every movement was purposeful, almost like a dance. Even the feast reflected restraint. Beautiful dishes carefully arranged to express balance and respect. Weddings across cultures varied on the surface, yet beneath the colors and rituals, they shared one fundamental purpose: to show that marriage was not a private feeling, but a public foundation. The witness of others turned a promise into a lifelong obligation. Beneath all these ceremonies, one truth remained constant: marriage shifted property. It decided who controlled land, who inherited wealth, and who held power. When a woman married in Europe, she often surrendered her identity under the law. The idea of coverture meant that her legal rights merged with her husband's. She could not sign contracts, own land independently, or handle money without his approval. Only widowhood restored her freedom. If her husband died, the dowry or a share of his estate, called dower, was meant to support her. In reality, that security depended on the goodwill of the husband's family. The Islamic world followed a very different model. Women kept their property before and after marriage. The mahr, the gift from the groom, belonged solely to the bride. She could spend it, invest it, or save it without anyone's permission. Marriage did not merge identities. Husband and wife remained legally separate individuals, bound by a contract but not by ownership. This structure protected women in ways that many modern societies only eventually adopted. In China, family lineage controlled everything. Property stayed within the male bloodline. Sons inherited land, and daughters left at marriage, joining the husband's family. However, widows often managed estates until sons came of age. Their authority was unspoken yet powerful. They held families together. In Japan, property circulated within elite clans to preserve political power. Women rarely owned land outright, but influence often came through connections and alliances formed by marriage. India carried its own system of property transfer. Dowries symbolized wealth and status, but could also become a burden. Families sacrificed everything to secure a daughter's marriage, hoping that wealth would ensure respect and security. At the same time, many women held personal possessions known as stridhan. Jewelry, gifts, and valuables belonged to them alone. These items served as quiet insurance in a world where their safety depended on others. Where property moved, power moved. Marriage organized nations, wealth, and entire family structures through what looked like personal unions. Even though marriage seemed permanent across cultures, ways of ending a union existed, each shaped by religion, property, and reputation. In Europe, the church ruled marriage, and breaking it was nearly impossible. Divorce did not exist in the way we understand it today. Instead, couples argued that the marriage had never been valid. Annulments cited issues like forced consent, hidden infertility, or close biological relation. Powerful families used these arguments to escape marriages that no longer served their political goals. Meanwhile, common people quietly separated, though without legal acknowledgement. In Islamic societies, marriage being contractual meant it could be dissolved. A husband could end the marriage through talaq, a formal declaration. However, a woman could also seek release through khul, returning part of her dowry in exchange for freedom. Courts could also intervene when harm or neglect occurred. The system was far from equal, but it recognized that a marriage could fail and that individuals needed a way out. China allowed separation under specific circumstances. Laws listed reasons such as adultery, jealousy, or infertility. However, a husband could not dismiss a wife who had no family to return to or had endured hardship for him. Japan allowed mutual written agreements signed in front of witnesses, treating separation as a matter of household management rather than morality. India's rules varied by region and community. In some areas, remarriage was common. In others, it was forbidden. In every culture, divorce exposed gender expectations, family identity, and social fears. Love hovered around the edges of these systems. It was celebrated in poetry, whispered in stories, and dreamed of by young people in every culture. Yet law and society remained cautious. Love could lead to chaos. Passion threatened alliances, property, and family honor. So, civilization tried to restrict it, and art endlessly tried to liberate it. That tension between duty and desire shaped centuries of literature. When we look at modern marriage, love-based, individualistic, expressive, we often forget that it stands on the bones of an older world. Consent, contracts, ceremonies, witnesses, rights, none of these ideas are modern inventions. They are adaptations. We kept what worked. We changed what harmed. We reshaped what limited freedom. Today, marriage belongs to individuals instead of families. Partnerships strive for equality rather than hierarchy. Rings replaced dowries. Love replaced duty. And yet, echoes of the medieval world remain. We still gather witnesses. We still sign legal contracts. we still celebrate through feasts. Marriage today carries a quiet, ancient promise. Not just I love you, but I will build something with you. The medieval world believed that love needed structure to survive. We inherited that belief, even if we express it differently. The past shows us that marriage was never just a feeling. It was, and still is, the work of creating a future together.